Welcome to the Michaelson Williams TSX podcast with your host, Michaelson Williams. On this episode of the TSX podcast, Michaelson has a candid discussion with James C. Peters, an all-around journeyman and positive mindset coach. James hails from across the pond in the UK, currently living in London, but has lived in the US a bit. James has been on the cover of magazines like Inc., Wealth Insider, and Forbes for his article contributions and unique style of self-help for men. He is also a successful entrepreneur and certified graduate of J. Shetty Transformation Mindset Coaching. James has trained with Navy SEALs in California and traveled the world looking for adventures and experiences that would help him to help other men struggling with their own life journey. But you don't have to take my word for it. Let's hear it from the founder of the James Peters lifestyle, Mr. Peters himself. But before we get started, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to the podcast on Substack, Rumble, and Instagram. Follow Michaelson on Twitter at MichaelsonWIL11 and at ADMFitnessFX. Your support is greatly appreciated. Let's get to it.
How are you doing this morning? I hope everything's well over in the UK.
Exactly, yeah. I'm based in the UK, just outside London. So yeah, it's just after 3 in the afternoon here.
Oh, it's in the afternoon?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just after 3 p.m.
Okay, that's something I didn't check into is what time actually you would be doing the call. For some reason, I had 2 in the morning stuck in my head for some reason. It might have been for another interview. But
that would be impressive.
Right.
But yeah.
Sometimes we have to do what we have to do. So.
Of course, exactly. Yeah, exactly, 100%.
So James, let's get right into this, and we'll go through the normal stuff. Like, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess today is a person who obviously is now a transformational mindset coach. I went through the J. Shetty certification program for life coaching back in 2020. Graduated in 2021. So now I work very closely with men to really overcome disempowering emotions and really help them navigate some of the challenges in life, maybe from past experiences, from childhood trauma, through even to current day type of trauma or any sort of difficult life challenges we're facing. Things could be depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, low confidence, self-sabotage, procrastination, all some of the key things I work with people. I'd say most of the men I'd work with are anywhere from sort of 25 through to 55. Some married, some single, some been through divorced. So it's really sort of a real sort of different background from that particular perspective. But most are kind of stuck in life, have a full-time job, but it's not their passion, it's not their purpose. So actually really want to discover that. I believe there's something bigger out there for them than what they're kind of doing at the moment. Want to shift mindset from having maybe a more scarcity type mindset to a lot more of a kind of an abundance type mindset. Yeah. That's really where, obviously, what I do now. That's something I've been doing up to the last couple of years or so. But 5 years ago, completely different person. I was. I hadn't done any personal development 5 years ago. I hadn't even picked up a personal development book. I probably didn't even know what it was, apart from Tony Robbins.
5 years ago, you weren't into personal development at all?
Exactly. Yeah, 5 years ago, living a very, very different life. Everything relatively comfortable. Good job. I was a business owner, doing something very different. Nice holidays.
What was your business?
Executive headhunting.
Okay.
So consultancy, so working with companies and basically staffing, recruitment. but then, yeah, then 2000, like anything in life, sometimes we have these personal challenges which come up. We get thrown a life event. Right. Could be a graduation event. Some people call them that. Some call it a life event. And lost my dad due to cancer. Lost my son. He was 4 years old. Probably about 4 months later. Then I was accused of a crime I hadn't done, so felt I spent a lot of time in that kind of judicial system before going to a criminal court to get to go through that process. There were obviously not guilty verdicts, and I sit here today. So went through some very difficult life challenges 5 years ago: depression, anxiety, suicide, addicted to painkillers, addicted to sleeping pills. Very much didn't want to be here, but that's when my journey started. So I guess I've had two lives really, in the fact that this one is very different than the previous one.
Let's kind of dig into those, if you don't mind, one by one. Actually, we'll go back to that. Tell me a little bit about like your basic life before you got into self-help, and before do you even call it self-help, what you do as a lifestyle coach? And I mean self-help in the formal sense of the industry, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It could be self-education. Obviously, we have formal education, and obviously now we have self-education, so self-help, personal development. Obviously, it's something where we're obviously taking something off our own back and learning it, rather than obviously being in a more of a formal setting and kind of have to learn through education, schooling, and that. So yeah, I mean, I generally had a very very good upbringing. I had parents who were very affluent, very well off. So I went to good schools. I attended university. I've lived on and off in the US for 6 years. I've lived in Florida, in Tampa. I went to University of South Florida. I've lived in San Diego for 3 years. I've lived in Atlanta for a bit of time. So yeah, on and off, I've lived in the US. Very comfortable life, nice holidays.
Were both of your parents in home through your childhood, and are they still together today?
They were. Obviously, my dad's obviously passed away, but they were married up until to his passing. Right. So our parents were together. I've got a sister. So everything was, as you could say, like a normal, I guess you would say well-off, and I would say, kind of normal well-off type of upbringing. Okay. No real personal challenges. I mean, I think when you start to dig back, especially through self-help and personal development, you become more aware of maybe some of the challenges I did actually have when I was younger. But obviously, up until I've done any sort of personal development work, I really wasn't aware of some of those maybe sort of childhood situations. Like naturally, you go through schooling, and naturally you have challenges there through stuff like bullying and obviously going through situations where you're trying to fit in, and you say you kind of you don't really know yourself. So there's lots of things which I've learned now. But I didn't obviously have any awareness of those 5 years ago, or so even before that. So generally, everything in life was comfortable. Yeah, I had obviously good jobs. Was paid quite well. So had nice houses, had nice cars, had kind of a nice lifestyle. So right. From an outside perspective, looked like a generally kind of a perfect type of situation.
All right. So let's go back to you were talking about or you mentioned bullying. So take me back if there's an incident that sticks out in your mind, high school or I don't know if you guys call it high school over there, but is there an incident that happened to you as far as bullying in high school that kind of shifted or changed? You said that as you got into self-help, it kind of allowed you to be able to reflect back and maybe recognize something that you didn't know at the time. Is there an incident that you can recall in school?
Yeah, so I do notice. Yeah, as you say, when I went back and started looking at stuff like that, then I was becoming more aware. I do remember around, I would say 12, 13, so that kind of teenage, bordering that sort of teenage sort of time, right. Being in school. I was at so kind of what we would classify here as more secondary school. Okay. I was in sort of private education. So the school I was in was kind of an all-boys school. And I do remember one evening, sort of, I guess, sort of five-ish type thing. So we all had, I guess, a common community in the fact that some of us, we were kind of bussed into school and bussed out because of external activities. Because of external activities after school, most of us stayed behind, did homework before the bus left sometime around usually like 5:30. So school finishes at 4. So there's usually that sort of hour and a half where we kind of have time to do our homework before getting back on the bus and ultimately going home. And I remember there was we were all kind of all sitting. I was sitting in a particular common room with loads of other people. I wouldn't say loads, probably another 5 or 10 different people. And something happened. I can't exactly remember the actual instance, but something happened and came up where something was said, to myself. I don't know the exact words. Something kind of triggered me to think that something wasn't right here. These people who I thought were my friends, it actually turned out, due to a comment, that they actually weren't my friends. And actually at that particular moment, they were actually kind of speaking negatively behind my back. And so I had no awareness of this situation. So suddenly I was in a situation where I thought I had this quite close group of friends, but actually they were kind of ganging up on me to a certain extent. And actually they weren't friends at all. I think it's kind of things you go through at that time, type of stage when you're kind of moving from that 12 to 13 and starting to get involved in kind of other different things. I was quite a quiet person. I was quite generally as a person back then quite timid, quite relatively shy. So I think I wouldn't say it's an easy target, but I wasn't so vocal. And it just worked out that actually who I thought were friends weren't, and actually speaking badly behind my back, and that was kind of generally sort of filtering into kind of the wider class which I was in.
How tall were you when you were 13 years old? Were you a smaller kid?
No, I was probably mid. Yeah, I wasn't. I was on the sports teams, so I played rugby and I played football, and I was on the sports. So I wasn't small, but I was pretty athletic. So I did a lot of like long cross country running and 1,500 meters. So I was generally size-wise quite slight, but tall. Like actually tall. Then I was probably, I don't know now. I was probably mid. There was obviously naturally as people they can get quite close. In some cases, nearly 6 foot in that. So, but there was I was probably, I don't know now, 5'5", 5'6", something like that. I mean, it's hard to say.
Okay.
I'm probably just under 6 foot now, 6 foot just under type thing. So, so yeah, I think, and it's just suddenly realised that actually, naturally, it was kind of like who I thought were friends actually weren't there speaking bad behind my back. And that particular time, I remember going very insular, so even going more inwards into myself, because then I felt I couldn't, naturally you can trust anyone, and suddenly you think people are against you, and then you kind of think people are talking behind your back, and so many different things. Obviously, pre social media and all that type of stuff, so it's very different to today's situation. But I just remember feeling quite insular. I remember having to be very cautious of who I spoke to, because any sort of information was obviously people were kind of using against me and all that type of stuff. And you kind of get into that very difficult mindset now, like very victimized type of mindset. And obviously at that particular time, it was very different. Wasn't really speaking to anyone, couldn't really confide in anyone because I couldn't trust anyone. So it was a real downward spiral. So I do remember that particular period. I think a very similar type of time. I do remember being at home in my own bedroom, and I remember sort of thinking about self-harm, actually in a way of which I kind of had a knife on me at that time, and I thought about self-harm, like cutting wrists and all that type of stuff.
Right.
And I remember I did it. I remember doing it, but slightly by accident. I hadn't meant to do it, but I actually did it. But it wasn't deep enough. But I've still got the scar today on my wrist of where ultimately I had cut myself. So these little things which I completely forgot about all started to unravel when I started to get into actual self-help and personal development.
When you were in secondary school, though, at that point where you're telling the story, that there was no physical confrontation, was there?
There wasn't really much from a physical perspective. No one ultimately would. I mean, there would be certain things where, naturally you're walking down a corridor and someone would just sort of, barge into you or shoulder barge you or say something verbal. But there wasn't any sort of general, sort of physical abuse to a certain extent. So there was kind of, there's verbal, and there's things where maybe you're walking down the corridor and suddenly someone just bars you from nowhere and stuff. So there's those little things, intimidation, I'd call it more now, one actual sort of physical abuse. Yeah.
Do you think young men and boys need to be bullied, or are you completely against it? Any type of, I don't like to call it abuse, because I think it's a natural process of getting testosterone, when you hit puberty and things like that.
Yeah.
And your the chemical body for a boy is turning into a man so he can go out there and kill something, food or whatever. So it's not something that a healthy boy can help. And the reason why I ask is because I've been in fights. I've been in a lot of fights. Mm-hmm. Every single fight that I had in school, it turned out that the person that was, and I'm using air quotes, trying to bully me, ended up being my friend. Of course, they had to take the ass whooping, but we became friends. Fighting to me is the pure sense for men to connect. Mm-hmm. So I almost believe that the lack of it growing up is actually harmful to the male psyche if it doesn't go all the way through, whether you get your butt whooped and you have to take the loss, or you get the win. We learn from the energy transfer from the other person during the time. This is why I ask you, was it, did you actually get into a physical, a physical fight? So you're saying that the actual physical tussle never transpired, correct?
Yeah, exactly. There was never any actual fist thrown or anything like that. There might have been naturally scraps here and there, where, right. As you say, some sort of obviously verbal abuse or some sort of physical type. I mean, I guess it could have got that way. I mean, I reacted to certain situations, but not really. It could, if I'd probably reacted and hit out and something, then I think it would have naturally escalated. But I was kind of that. I kind of just I kind of, reacted, but without kind of, throwing fists and stuff like that. So I guess it could have escalated, but obviously he never did. So there were certain things, and obviously you kind of played sports. Sometimes you might have put it out, you might have sort of done it on the sports field, a little bit more rugby training or football training, like put in a tackle heel there without, so exactly. So there's maybe certain things in those type of environments, but no, there was never any physical fights at that particular time. But I think you're right. I think going back to the question around bullying, I think obviously you learn a lot in those situations. You do. I mean, you learn a lot when you hit the canvas, or you learn a lot when you're, at the dregs, the bottom of life. I mean, that's really where you learn everything. And so I think it's a natural evolution of life to go through those challenges, in school, because it does set you up for real. It does set you up for real life and what's going to come. Life is, it is challenging. It will kick you down, and it's not all roses. And sometimes if you haven't had maybe some of those challenges in the early years of our life, it's a painful lesson in later years.
Right. Do you consider yourself introverted or extroverted?
Yeah, I think naturally I would have said probably 4 or 5 years ago, definitely before everything happened. I was naturally quite a introverted character. I enjoyed my own company. I had obviously some close friends and that, but yeah, I wasn't, if we went out in a large group of people and maybe people I didn't particularly know, I'd generally be, obviously the quieter one. But yeah, kind of, naturally I would have said, a lot more, introverted for sure. Right. I think obviously over the last 4 or 5 years, self-development, you're going through you're building self-confidence, building your self-esteem, you're kind of building a person from scratch, you're kind of putting yourself into very different situations. I think that it crosses over a little bit of both now. In certain areas, I think now in certain areas I would, classify myself as still quite introverted. But then in other parts of my life, there would be these more, what you classify more extrovert, more, I guess I'd put myself out there quite a lot more, doing the work I do. And obviously with that, you get a lot of, you have to take a lot of critique. And I would never have done that 4 or 5 years ago. It wouldn't have been something I would have even put myself up for. So I think it's a bit of both now. But I think, that's still general sort of, I enjoy quiet time and stuff. So I guess, there is still a lot of that, introversion, but there's so many different things out there. There's a real fine balance between both now, to a certain extent, or the environment you're in.
How hard do you have to push yourself in those extroverted moments? When you're and from moment to moment, like when you have to become the extrovert, how hard do you have to push yourself mentally from the internal point of view?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's something I've obviously learned over probably the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, right. I've always put myself in difficult situations. So like even at Christmas time, I took myself off on my own and summited Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, obviously with a group of people, but I didn't know any of them. Okay. So you got to learn a new people in that period of time. And so and then I've done stuff around. I did some Navy SEALs training last year in San Diego, and again went out and met a group of men, like 15 of us, didn't know any of them. And you kind of have to put yourself out, and especially in that type of environment as well. So I think I enjoy doing it more now, but I'm a lot more comfortable with kind of who I am. So in certain times in those situations, or that time, I would be very, active and speaking to people, but then I'd have my own downtime and I'd be quite quiet for maybe 1 or 2 hours and stuff. Whereas before I got quite anxious about that, because I would think I'd have that internal dialogue, that internal narrative
Right.
of, oh, you're not speaking too much, oh, you're not doing this, or, by having that very sort of negative self-talk. Whereas I don't really have that now. I'm just, I know who I am as a person, and I can go through those moments where I am very talkative, or go to a state where I am very quiet. And it's just, I don't feel as though I have that need to, kind of push myself to be this significant person, or, I just am authentically who I am, type thing.
Right. This question goes back to that moment in your room where you had the knife, but these questions aren't meant to be triggering negative points. I'm just trying to dig into the foundation of you, so that I can understand how you are able to transform men from your experience and from your knowledge. So to go back to that moment in your room, and you're thinking about self-deletion. How strong was that emotion, and do you remember what triggered that emotion? And do you also think that those are normal, as far as self-deletion? Is that normal for young men to go through or anyone for that matter, to go through that process as they're changing from adolescent to teenager and adult? Do you think that's a normal process?
Thank you for listening to the Michaelson Williams TSX podcast, where Michaelson talks about everything true success. I hope you're enjoying the show. Host Michaelson Williams looks forward to bringing you more fantastic interviews with people who are shaping the future. This episode is sponsored by ADM Fitness Effect, the app that allows users to monetize their increased fitness output and then pays them in ADM e-crypto tokens for completed tasks. Also by Flow State Design clothing and accessories for the eruditely man, and Map Magazine, the magazine for the true success seeker, like you. Visit jamespeterslifestyle.com to create a better life for yourself through a transformation of mindset. Book a one-on-one coaching session today and start building the life you've always wanted. Don't forget to support the podcast if you like the content. Let's continue.
As far as self-deletion, is that normal for young men to go through or anyone for that matter, to go through that process as they're changing from adolescent to teenager and adult? Do you think that's a normal process?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I do remember sort of going back to that particular time, and I think going from obviously going into more of those teenage years. Obviously, I'm talking obviously quite a few years ago now. But I think they are a very difficult time. I think you're getting into a stage where people are starting to change from sort of I wouldn't say being from sort of childhood. So maybe stuff which you used to do, some people are getting into a little bit more, even though it's kind of a young age, drinking and getting into more, obviously, girls, and getting into, they sort of, trying to express themselves, trying to have that significance, trying to fit in a little bit more. They want to be obviously in kind of the, the group. People start. So I think naturally it's naturally a challenging time. They say at that age, some people are getting bigger. Some people are growing bigger,
right.
Not only height-wise and that, So I think there's lots of masculine type of side. There's a lot of different challenges you face there. And I think for myself, looking back now, didn't know this obviously at that time, was probably a feeling of like helplessness. I think when you kind of, you're moving in and to a different stage of life, and you're maybe not invited to things anymore where you used to be. You used to obviously have, go and, how you used to have like parties and go around people's houses and all that type of stuff. And then suddenly things start to change and you're not invited to things, and you kind of feel like you're a little bit more the odd one out.
Right.
People don't like you. So I think all this is kind of, going on biologically. You're changing as well.
Right.
Some people have girlfriends, some people don't. If you don't, picked on and all this type of stuff. So I think there's so much happening at that stage of life. I think it's probably even more so now with kind of where we are from a kind of a social media perspective, and there's so much more influence there now than was when obviously I was growing up. So I think why when it came to obviously having a knife in my hand and obviously letting come over this, I don't really know what I was planning on doing. I definitely wasn't thinking of suicide. I just think it was that real sense of, it could have been a cry for help. I think it could have been. Though I didn't pull enough blood for me to have to go to a hospital or anything like that. But it could have been that. It could have just been like a kind of a situation where I had so much negative feeling around myself as a person that it could be a sense of feeling something. Sometimes when you kind of go through those stages and you feel quite numb, you're suppressing emotions.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that it can lead to, you can kind of lead to not feeling any emotions, because when you suppress emotions, you suppress them all. So you can't suppress some and some. So you'd have this feeling of being numb and feeling nothing, and it could be that. It could have been a sense to actually feel something as well. So it could have been all these things going on at that time. Obviously, or I do know that there's probably a combination of all of those.
Right.
To be fair, when I look back and obviously dug back into myself and dug into, there's probably a lot going on at that particular stage, and I think there's probably accumulation of a lot of those things happening at that time.
I definitely agree with you there, where we have depression and thoughts of self-deletion. To me, that's kind of a new thing, because when you have to, if you think about being on the prairies or being on the farm and or going even further back, and when psychologically we were afraid of the dark, and we had to hunt and go for miles and miles just to get meat or something, some sustenance to survive. I don't believe people were sitting around talking about how depressed they were. There was too much to do. Mm-hmm. But now life is so easy that we have all of this empty space. Life is it's easy, it's convenient, and yet it's hard. But it's hard in a different way. It's less physically hard. So we have to impose physical hardness upon ourselves. This is why we go to the gym and we do all of these events that try to mimic the tougher life that our ancestors live. We're actually trying to mimic those things by all of these activities, skydiving and going to the gym and surfing, and we're just trying to mimic life the way it was. But we also have a bunch of dead time, and in that dead time, that dead space, just like you were talking about, there's a numbness that creeps in, like something telling us, something's trying to tell us that we should be moving, or something like that. And when we don't deal with that, then that maybe it's the negative ego or something's trying to get into that space and affect us in a self-harm or negative way. I'll ask you this. Do you know anyone who's super active? And I'm not talking about being happy all the time, but do you know anyone who's super active who is also depressed? I personally don't. How about you?
No, I wouldn't say so. No, I think I haven't really. I think that it does stem from a lot. I think physical activities, mental sort of health are obviously both linked. And so it's a lot of it is, if you're not exercising, if you're not getting in nature, if you're not eating the right foods, I mean, this is naturally always going to, this is going to be, affect your mental health as well. There can't be someone who doesn't have physical activity, eats McDonald's all the time, watches the news, who is, feeling in their mentally, have good mental well-being. So I think it works the same on the physical side as well. They're both linked together. So no, I don't know anyone who's very physically active who also is maybe some challenges. Naturally, people, we live in a life where things do go up and down. But yeah, I wouldn't say someone who's physically active has kind of real sort of high depression and anxiety. They may have some other stuff going on around passion and purpose and where they're actually going in life, but I wouldn't say they have, real sort of, high depression, anxiety.
Right. Tell me quickly, what's the best advice that you've ever gotten from your father?
I mean, he was always very sort of, for myself, very active in being able to, kind of really say, like, you're good enough. I mean, obviously, I've got into personal development after he's passed away, so it's a bit more sort of challenging and now. But he was always very, very loving, very always was very supportive. Always kind of really was have that, like, you're good enough, you can do anything, anything you put your mind to, you can do, and really kind of push that into me. I probably didn't take it on as much probably back then because I was a different, I hadn't really woken up to certain things in life.
Right.
So, and maybe some of it actually potentially fell on deaf ears at that time. But yeah, I do remember, obviously very loving, very passionate, very supportive. Always was, highly involved in what I was doing. So always gave me the belief that, the confidence that, I could do anything I wanted to do. So it was always I take that from those interactions of just being able to, someone who's just, very supportive and believes in you when most of the time, you don't believe in yourself.
Right. I have another question from that, but I'm going to ask a different question before I get there, and that is, what is the most between age, let's say 12 and 17, what was your most rebellious act against your parents' wishes?
Oh, it's a good one.
Huh?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think it's hard to even go back then.
You did something.
Yeah, just trying exactly. I just trying to think where, and a lot of my stuff actually happened later on in life when I got into more scrapes, probably sort of the university stage and up. But yeah, back to sort of 12 to 17. I think, probably at that particular time. So when I was 16, I moved to Belgium through my dad's job. So I was obviously in the UK, and then as a family we moved out to Belgium. And obviously there, being on mainland Europe or continental Europe, I hadn't really done a lot of drinking by the time I'd moved to Belgium, really, and the odd bit here or there, obviously still underage. But hadn't really done a lot of drinking. Obviously, in Belgium and the beers and all that type of stuff, it's right. A lot more popular. So I do remember going out sort of not long after I'd moved to Belgium, and I'd gone out with friends from a new school where I just joined. So you want to fit in, you want to sort of make new friends, and over there they have these what is called like a chevalier of beer, which is actually kind of like a yard of ale. And obviously the main drink over there, the main beer over there is like Stella Artois. So it's a strong 5% lager. It's not. And I think I had like a couple of those yards of ale, and I was completely. And I was sort of, my dad said, you have to be careful, because he knew I was going to drink. He said, like, be careful, because he knew that I hadn't really done a lot of drinking. But I kind of ignored that, that advice.
Is that underage in Belgium? 16, 17?
Not really there. No, it's not. I mean, obviously, I know in the US it is. Right. In the UK, I don't remember now. I think it's more. I think it's more 18 here in the UK. I think 16 you can smoke. So it was generally underage, but not over there, really. Okay.
So what happened?
I think it's 16 there. I just like collapsed in the bar, I completely passed out. I was like sick everywhere, and I was just I mean it was a mess. I think I was just like I was fell asleep in the toilets for the whole evening in the end, and then sort of having to get in and had to sort of get home. Obviously, the next morning, so I'd been out all night really, and it was just everything was a mess. So, but I was kind of warned, because obviously Dad, he kind of knew that. He knew what was going to happen and where I was going, and obviously going out and drinking. So I think he was kind of cautious and sort of said, "No, you have to be careful." But I went straight into like yards of ale, which is a bad move. So yeah, that's what I can remember that sort of 12 to 17 stage.
Did you learn your lesson? No.
No, it just once over there, drinking was obviously, when you get to that age anyway, especially over there in particular, it becomes a really big thing. So you just kind of get up and go again, make some good stories, you never. I actually don't drink now. That probably, but yeah, it didn't really stop me at that time. There was many instances after then, unfortunately.
And now you don't drink at all.
I don't drink at all now. No, it wasn't because I think again, when you dig back and you start looking into things, I definitely had a problem with drinking. I think it's just when you start getting into self-development and you start going into certain things and you kind of look at your reaction in certain situations, like alcohol didn't really suit me. I think when I look back at some of difficult challenges in life, a lot of it was alcohol fueled. Obviously, naturally, later in life, I did get into fights due to alcohol. I was arrested in New York because of alcohol. I was arrested in Florida because of alcohol, and especially I was underage then. So yeah, when you start to look back, I suddenly realised that it probably doesn't suit me that well. And so even though I had generally calmed down a lot these last few years anyway, it was an easy decision to really kind of. I think my last drink was December 2021. So not massively long ago, but I've had over a year now of not drinking. So yeah, it's something which is I kind of stopped altogether now.
Wow. Okay. So let me jump back again. What is the best piece of advice that you've gotten in your life from someone outside of your family?
Yeah, this is actually quite an easy one. It's actually very basic, but it's very profound. So I had a coach probably 3 years ago. Yeah, probably about 3 years ago, when I started, on my personal journey and all that type of stuff. And I wasn't coaching at that time. I wasn't even thinking about coaching at that time, but I had a coach helping me, try to find my purpose in life after what happened. And he said to me, James, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I looked at him and I was just like, oh, wow. That's profound. That's probably one of the most profound things I've ever heard. It's just so basic, but so true. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And when you realize that at a deeper level, like intellectually, you kind of, oh yeah, I know that. But when it hits emotionally, it actually makes a big thing, because it's just so powerful. And that's always stuck with me over these last sort of 3 or 4 years. It just hit at a right time, but it hit emotionally over just an intellectual understanding of it. And that made me really sort of wake up in a way to understanding that, if I don't actually get off my ass to a certain extent and start changing what I want to, start changing what I see in my outer world, I'm going to have to change what I do in my inner world. So yeah.
Let's stay on that vein. What's the best piece of advice that you think, because we never know, that you've given to someone else?
I think for me, this is probably quite common for people in personal development. But I think if you're kind of not in it or just starting on it, is that your thoughts create your reality, and how you think, it very much impacts your life. If you're thinking negative and why me, victim mentality, then that shows up in your reality. Nothing will change because of that, because of the way your thoughts. So if you have to physically change the way you think to have any change on what you see in the outside world. And I think it's a big realization for people. And I've seen people kind of really, when that hits to a certain level, to really wake up to understand that, you've created your reality due to the way you think. There's nothing out there. There's nothing, the way it is the way you've created what you see. So if you don't have great relationships, if you don't have the finances you want, if you don't have the health you want, if you don't have anything, this is all on you. And when you really get that and understand that, then you're the only one who can change your life. There's nothing out there. But we live in such a consumerist type of society. We're programmed that we think everything is outside of ourselves. Right. When actually everything's internal. And that's where the change needs to happen. And I think that from working with people, even though like people maybe like ourselves who are in personal development understand that, I think it's a big wake-up call for people who don't.
So your belief is that, or your thinking, your belief is that we are responsible for everything, good and bad?
I believe so, yeah. I believe if you obviously believe in the law of attraction, I think obviously the primary law of the universe is vibration. So how we vibrate, we attract. So if we're vibrating with low level emotions and low self-esteem and just very, very sort of negative and disempowering, we're attracting that into our life. Living a happy, abundant life is naturally thinking scarcity. So you have to change your frequency. You have to change your vibration. You have to operate from a higher frequency to actually change what you see. And so, yeah, I think 100% we are kind of responsible for how our life is. There's nothing kind of out there to from that particular perspective. And people will naturally say, oh, but this person did this to me, or that person did that to me, and that's you've attracted that person somewhere in your life. Through to probably the way you think, or naturally the universe will always give us lessons. We'll always be bring people will come into our life, and it just be a lesson. We'll call it a life event, a graduation, or whatever you want to call that, to kind of get us to wake up, to get us to kind of this wake up. That there's that the inward journey is where you need to start. If everything is outside of yourself, we're given these lessons in life. So yeah, I definitely believe that.
So that's exactly where I was going. At what age does that begin? Where you're responsible for, okay, this isn't true, but I'm just going to give you a scenario. At 27, I was driving down the road. A deer ran out in front of me. I swerved to avoid the deer and totaled my car in a ditch. Was that me attracting that?
It can really go back to the thoughts you were thinking previously. At some point, it could have been months ago. It could have been previously. It's naturally again. So I listened to a similar scenario where someone said they had someone rear-ended them. Someone had a car accident and someone rear-ended them from behind. And how did they attract that into their life? Well, no, they weren't obviously putting out thoughts of car accident. No, they weren't obviously projecting those thoughts. But at that moment of what that happened, when someone rear-ended them, what were you feeling? And people say, oh, I felt really frustrated, I felt really angry, I felt really annoyed. Well, these were the thoughts you were thinking. These were the feelings you were transmitting at that point, and it's happened, it's materialized, and someone rear-ending you. So that's kind of how those scenarios work. And it's in that particular case, there may be a certain instance of where there's been thoughts and feelings, or sometimes it's the wake-up call. You get in life, depending on what you were doing at that particular that particular time, because that's a significant event which you've been through. I know it's obviously, I don't think it's a real event, but it's a significant event of real field. That there could be a wake-up call. You could say it's a near-death experience potentially. You could have died in that instance, and it's about then you wake up to think, well, life's really short. Maybe my mindset or my focus is everything outside of myself. Maybe my ego's taken over. And maybe this is an event where I can actually start to think, wow, this is something I can, this is something significant to make me believe in maybe more of a spiritual type path, or maybe go more of an inward type of journey. So there's these little things which I think come through of that. But usually it's around some sort of, thoughts or patterns of behavior, which is manifested into this happening.
Okay. So that was age specific, so I'm going to keep it age specific. I am a 7-year-old child, and I start feeling sick. My parents take me to the hospital. We find out that I have cancer, and I have 8 months to live. Did I attract that?
No, I mean that obviously not at that particular age. No, I think if we all believe that
why
this
not?
is this is our at that thing is at that age, especially at that particular age. I mean, you up until sort of 7 years old, you haven't developed your prefrontal cortex. So you at your age, you're very much a sponge. So you're just taking things in. You've got no rational thinking. You've got no rational mind, and that's why a lot of people have childhood trauma, because of naturally they've grown up in certain environments and through parenting and through, generally anyone, around them. But they're a sponge, they're taking things in. So a lot of this goes into, conditional, unconditional love, and there's lots of different challenges around that. So you wouldn't have attracted that. You don't have that prefrontal cortex, you don't have that kind of spiritual side of the brain developed by then. But yeah, I lost a son at 4, so it's kind of like, I didn't attract that. It's just sometimes these things happen.
Hold on, James. Hold on. I'm going to give you another scenario. I'm going to give you another scenario. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on this one. Okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
What was the age again that I gave you? 7-year-old?
7.
Right? I wished I'm now a 7-year-old boy, and I'm a 7-year-old boy. I went with my mother to a shop, and at the shop I saw a red fire truck. And when I saw it, James, I fell in love with that red fire truck. It had the white lettering on the side. It had the extension ladder. It had the box said it had a horn on it, and it had matter of fact, it was a Tonka truck. And man, I loved that truck. And I asked my mom for it, and she said, no, we can't afford that truck.
Mm-hmm.
But I never forgot that truck. And I got in my mind that I would ask Santa for that truck. And I know Santa's going to bring me that truck for Christmas. He's going to come down that chimney. If at 7 you still believe in those things, but he's going to come down that chimney. I'm going to put out cookies and milk.
Mm-hmm.
I want that truck. On Christmas morning, when I'm opening up the few packages that are there, the few gifts that are there, because Mother did say that we can't afford it. In one of those boxes, it's about the size of a Tonka truck, and when I unwrap and pull the packaging apart, it is indeed that red Tonka truck. Did I attract that truck as a 7-year-old boy? Did I
good question.
I think to my apologies. Did I exercise the law of attraction to get that red extension ladder fire truck?
It's a good question. I think. Obviously, if you because there was a connection there, right? Obviously, it hit you emotionally, and obviously at a very young age, and obviously you were probably, who knows, at the 7, if you were thinking about that, praying for that, always on your mind. Your mum might have been doing the same. She might have realised, obviously, the fact that you really wanted this truck, and she might have manifested it for you. So, but yeah, I definitely think there's a law of attraction at work there for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I agree with you 100% on both of them, because in my mind, law of attraction is it's a universal connection. Therefore, by extension, the people who we are around, maybe the 7-year-old girl did not attract cancer, but it could have been a fear of her mother or father of having a child that ends up with cancer because of something they saw. Maybe the numerous amounts of commercials about women with cancer. That's why I used a little girl. And in the same instance, the boy wanting the fire truck is also using the law of attraction. My question is does the law of attraction depend on the frontal cortex? Does it
I'm looking at deep in that, but yeah, obviously, from a young age, you don't develop your prefrontal cortex until you're 7, and that's where there's some of the challenges we faced in through childhood, because ultimately you're a sponge at that age. You're taking all the information. So
Right.
say exactly, if your mum says no, you can't afford that. You can't have that red Tonka truck, and for example, she, instead of saying couldn't afford it, couldn't afford it, but it said, no, you're not good enough, or you've not been good enough today, or you've not behaved well enough. That goes straight into that particular child, and then they suddenly build this pattern of not being good enough, or I need to impress my parents, or they don't love me, all this type of stuff. And these are some of the challenges which people face in childhood. We still run patterns and programs today into adulthood, because they've never looked into that past, and they've never really dug through those patterns and programs. But but is it at work, and at 7 that's more the spiritual side of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. So it's generally it's harder to say. I think, has it been attracted obviously through a parent or through yourself? I wouldn't. Ultimately, I don't know.
Right.
If a law of attraction works at 7 years old.
And the fact of the matter is it's okay to not know, because I don't really believe anybody knows. Is the law of attraction, in your opinion, more accidental than deliberate?
I do think it's predominantly more. I think it's predominantly more accidental. Obviously, the whole law of attraction and The Secret and everything, obviously is massively, grown so much. So we do know more and more now. And even if you read back to, the work from people like Napoleon Hill and
right.
Neville Goddard and all this type of stuff, you have that instance that your thoughts create your reality, and so there is elements of law of attraction there. I think where where The Secret obviously worked for The Secret worked for some people, but it worked for a vast majority of not people, because there were certain ingredients missing out around the kind of the general law of vibration. You have to match that vibration, so you have to raise your frequency and and so some people did, but a lot of people didn't. It's kind of like baking a chocolate cake, for example. You're sort of given maybe some of the recipe. You're still going to make a chocolate cake, but it may not be that good, or maybe lacking certain ingredients. And some people might have just uncovered the right ingredients through just general doing things themselves.
Right.
So I think there's many. I think ultimately people are attracted more by accident than actually following probably the kind of the right formula.
Right.
But obviously it has become a lot more common now. I think we understand things maybe a little bit more. But I think generally people have done it by accident, really.
Right. So basically, The Secret is still a secret, because I've actually done research on for a number of reasons, and you probably already know this. 92% of people who set goals, which is an active ingredient for the law of attraction, is goal setting. 92% of people fail. So they fail, and I have a list of like the top 20 things that people ask for, work towards, want to improve. There's a list of 20 things, and the data came from I can't remember if it came from Weight Watchers or something, but it was it's the most it was the most intense study or data grab on goal achievement based on New Year's resolutions. And what came back is that 92% of people who set goals still fail at them, so they don't get what they want. and only 8% of people do. And if it's attached to a New Year's resolution, the New Year's resolution is usually completely ended by March, so within 3 months. So if we take that data and we put it with the law of attraction, it tells us that the law of attraction, The Secret, it tells us that people still don't get it. Like it's still a secret, because if it wasn't a secret, I personally believe that people would use it to better their lives, and that's not actually bearing out. Would you agree with that?
No, I would do. I think where The Secret kind of, there was a kind of one of the big missing ingredients was around identity. So you have to obviously, that goal you want, or you want to manifest a certain thing in your life. It could be the relationship you want. It could be it could be the car. It could be the money, the bank balance, whatever. Right. You have to assume that identity already. So you have to be that person already. You have to already have, like, it almost says to me, it's kind of like already having the £1 million in your back pocket, and you're walking around with that £1 million. Obviously, in reality, you don't have it, but you've already assumed the identity of a millionaire. And that's the challenge. I think people always are trying to attract something from lack, of not having it and wanting it. And obviously you don't attract it because you're coming from a lack. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges. And I think that's where people want no set goal, is that if you have a goal, you kind of have to assume the identity of the person who has that goal already. And it just needs the reality to just, current reality, outer world needs to kind of get to that stage as well. But you've already assumed that identity of that person who's got this body, or who's got this relationship, or who's got this money. But if you're coming from a general lack of what you want, you don't attract it. And so I think that's a big. I think that obviously that is a huge issue, which is hard to grasp. Sometimes intellectually you can get that, and someone says that, oh, okay, I understand that. But actually putting that into action, and actually, it's hard when you've got, maybe 20,000, 50,000 worth of debt, and you have to pay your bills. You maybe got people knocking on your door wanting money, and trying to assume a person who's abundant. It's a challenging concept. But if you're coming from lack, you're not going to attract it. So I think that was naturally one of the big the big challenges. And then people sometimes just set unrealistic goals. It's just, a lot of it is around doing small steps, 1% increase each day, compounding effect, that over 360 days a year, that's 360% increase, so it's just about starting small, seeing those little wins and continue to build, whereas naturally someone would want to, this big, massive change in their life and happen quickly, because we live in a life and a society now where instant gratification, and we can just press a button and food's delivered to our door within 20 minutes. We're kind of used to push button, things just changing. And I think that's changed a lot because our mindset, it just thinks we have an entitlement that these things are going to happen if we do these right things. But you have to work for it. You have to put the time in. And if that's not only putting the physical work in, but you have to put the mental work in. You have to put in the work internally to change your identity of what you want. And that takes time. And I think that's some of the challenges which people face, is that they want instant change. And we don't, because we live in a kind of a society where there's, we're used to that to a certain extent. It's just all there for us, be it food, be it relationships with, dating apps and all that. Everything's just, we can just get everything with the push of a button. But when we actually have to dig in and do the work internally, it takes time.
Right. All right. Good stuff.
We'll be right back. Thank you for listening to the Michaelson Williams TSX podcast, where Michaelson talks about everything true success. I hope you're enjoying the show. Host Michaelson Williams looks forward to bringing you more fantastic interviews with people who are shaping the future. This episode is sponsored by ADM Fitness Effect, the app that allows users to monetize their increased fitness output and then pays them in ADM crypto tokens for completed tasks. Also by Flow State Design clothing and accessories for the eruditely man, and Map Magazine, the magazine for the true success seeker, like you. Visit jamespeterslifestyle.com to create a better life for yourself through a transformation of mindset. Book a one-on-one coaching session today and start building the life you've always wanted. Don't forget to support the podcast if you like the content. Let's continue.
Okay, here we go. The first girl you ever fell in love with. How old were you?
Oh my goodness. I remember being like, I think even when I was at primary school, 8, 9, something like that. I remember there was a girl on my table who I was just like fascinated with. Obviously, I didn't know anything about that stuff back then, but just fascinated with them. We used to do, and then as boys and girls, we used to always like, do this thing like kiss chase in the playground at that age and stuff like that. So I think there was generally, I think I do, but I do even now. I do know this girl. I'm not connected. I'm not sort of have any connection with this person. I don't even. I don't think I even know her name. But I remember just have this blonde hair and just So I remember that age. I was just like, oh wow, she's incredible type thing. So I remember probably at that age. And when I was older, I think, but again, probably 16, 17.
Uh-huh.
Another girl in my class when I was at kind of sixth form college, who I'm still in contact with, and I'm thinking, she's incredible. So probably those two instances are kind of a known off the bat of my head, strike to mind.
All right. And either of those instances, did you feel like you knew those girls before you knew them, or have you ever met a person that you thought you knew before you actually met them? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, a few years ago or whatever, I probably would have said no, because I haven't done any work since then. But I do believe now, I do believe that into those certain connections you meet, you might have known it from a past life, right?
Right.
So I do, so there is, and it's natural. Sometimes it's easy, right? You just connect with someone, it's just, they're very rare instances. Well, personally for me, they are. But sometimes there's just a connection where you just meet someone, it just feels comfortable. It just feels right. It just feels, And obviously, I don't know about 8 or 9 or anything like that. But definitely when I was, obviously, 16, that type of, there was just, and even since then as well, you just met people and you just connect. And I always think, obviously we don't know. We don't know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. So you never can't. You're not going to rationally think that you know. But I think you could have easily met them in a previous life. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Okay. What's your favorite sports car, and your most high-end car that you've ever driven so far?
So Porsche is the number one. I have a picture on my wall in front of me now. Yellow Porsche 911 Carrera S. That's kind of, that's what I'm manifesting. That's kind of on my, that's kind of something I'm attracting. So that. Car. I would probably say, going back, when I lived in the US, I had a Mustang, like a top end. Mustang. So probably
5.0.
Was this?
Did you have the 5.0?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I lived in San Diego, California, and all that sort of stuff. So I would say I've had some in the UK here. I've BMWs and stuff, but I still probably that that probably would be the from an ownership perspective, probably the one which has probably been the highest.
Okay. So let me get into this then. When you're teaching, you teach primarily men, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. What do you tell men to stay away from the most? Give me give me 5 things, if you can, that you tell men that in order to keep a good mindset, you must stay away from these things. What are those things?
I mean, number one, I would say mainstream media. I think that is something which you're never going to have the right mindset if you're plugged into the news and mainstream media. It's very fear-based, and there's obviously, you can go quite deep into that around how that works and how they hook you in through the amygdala in the brain, which I notice is negative more than positive. So mainstream media, mainstream news. I think your peer group. I think you've got to really be cautious of who you hang with. Who are your friends, who you speak to, who you communicate on a daily basis, and that has a big influence on your life. I think outside of that, I'm kind of, it's more stay away from. So I'm just thinking what else would I sort of advise them to stay. I mean, they're kind of the main 2. I think, obviously, if you're, I mean, I'm obviously, people can drink and stuff, but I wouldn't say drinking to excess. I think that's never going to end well. So your health, I think, is a huge thing from an influence perspective. If you're and then obviously used to diet as well. I think you're not going to have an abundant and a happy mind if you're I always say to people, like, your inputs shape your outputs. So what are you inputting into yourself? And that's only obviously from a food or dietary perspective, but it's even electronically. So I think I'd always say be cautious of what you're consuming on a day-to-day basis, like from a social media perspective. I think that's very that you're not going to have a great mindset if you're spending hours on end of plugged into social media as well. I think if you're not getting out, if you're not got any sort of habits or rituals or daily practices, meditation, breath work, visualization, these type of practices, if you're not doing any of things like that, I know you just want to what to stay away from, but I think if you're not doing anything like that, I think you're not going to have, the life you want. And I think, I think just, be aware of your thoughts. And be very, understand who you are. Like, I guess the key to any change is self-awareness. Build that self-awareness tool. Of who you are, what you want to do. So those are some of the things I know. Some kind of like what you kind of crossovers in what you stay away from. But
and then you can just go into giving me 5 things that you advise men that they should do in order to create the abundant mindset.
So for me, myself is always around, your number one change really for you as an individual is your peer group, really. Who are you hanging around with? Because yes, you can put in all the work, you can do your meditation, you can do your visualization, you can do your breath work, but if you're hanging around with 5 people who drink every night of the week, who are, take drugs, who play video games all the time, you will naturally come to 6. It's a law of conformity. So you can do certain things, but if your peer group is disastrous, it's not going to change. So so I think I'm always like, who are your peer group? That is huge to change. If you want to be who you want to be, who you hang with. So if you want to be be a millionaire, or you want to start your own business, or you want to be an entrepreneur, then you've got to hang around with those people, because if you're not, it's very challenging. But naturally, then it's around a big big key around my days built around the 4 pillars of kind of mental toughness is what I go into people with. So it's breath work. Can you calm your nervous system? We have obviously the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and a lot of people, if without real strong breath control, aren't able to really calm their sympathetic nervous system, move over to the parasympathetic, and that's where you get a lot of triggers, a lot of reactions, because they're not in control of themselves. So breath work is key to changing your physiology from a nervous system perspective.
Right.
I think meditation, because you can then really start analysing your thoughts and really understanding your thoughts and really disengaging from your thoughts. You're an observer of your thoughts, you're not your thoughts. So that's key as well. I think visualisation, visualise who you want to be. Who is that person? What is the vision for your life? Who does that person be? What are their daily habits? Who do they look like? Who do they hang around with? You can really start working on building that visualization muscle. It's power. It's a key thing for the law of attraction. Being visioning yourself being that person already, because then you'll have that vibrational match to bring that person into reality. And then it's around positive self-talk. How would you speak to yourself? Again, that changes your physiology. If you have a negative self-talk and always talking down and self-deprecating, that's not going to help you. So you've got to fill yourself with positive, your own positive mantras, whatever they're positive for you. I have stuff like, I am blessed, I'm prosperous, I'm lucky, I'm abundant, all I am follows, so these type of things, and they're difficult at first, but they're key to change. And then micro goals. So again, it goes back to just setting yourself with 1 goal, 2 goals a day, especially at the beginning, and just 1% increase each day makes a huge difference. Change doesn't happen, these big monumental changes, it happens incrementally, and that's why the compounding effect is, as I think Einstein said, is the 8th beauty of the world. So yeah, these are some of the things I kind of talk to people around and help them with.
So James, I am a shy person, and if you can give me 3 points, not me personally, but in this scenario, I'm a shy guy, and you said the people that I hang around with are basically a mirror of myself. What are 3 points that you can give me to help me get into a millionaires group where I can learn from the people who I want to emulate?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, obviously you can take shyness, like what is shyness? I think when you really deconstruct that, it's really like, the basic of that is you don't want to be discovered. So there's maybe some work there. Why don't that's really what it's about. It's like you don't want to be discovered. You don't want to put yourself out there. You don't want to be you don't want to be judged ultimately. So there's a lot of, obviously you can deal into that, but really it's about being offering to break into certain groups of people. You have to be able to offer value. I think if you're going in wanting value without actually giving anything, then people are naturally always kind of, back up. So you have to go in and obviously create value yourself on what that looks like for that particular group, and be offering advice and be offering help, because then naturally people will help you. You kind of have to give before you get back, and we see that in general in life. The more value you provide, the more successful you are. And that's why a lot of people give away a lot for free, give away a lot because they just want to offer value and want to offer help people. And naturally, with attraction and law of attraction and abundance and stuff, it will come back to you. So I think it's around, first, it's just deconstructing shyness, or what does that mean to you and why? Because shyness is really just basically you don't want to be discovered. Offering value to others, and we can all what are some of the key things you want, and generally I think it's just really being authentic. I think that's one of the key things all, to life is authenticity. It's just being able to be your authentic, natural, natural self would be sort of what I would look at.
Okay, those are fantastic points. For you personally, when did you discover that you had your own voice in this space, or do you feel like you have your own voice yet? And that means brand of lifestyle coaching. Because we learn from other people, it takes us a little while to get our own voice. Are you there? Do you feel like you have your own voice, or are you still kind of encapsulated in the bubble of your training?
I think it's a bit of both. I think I've definitely over the last I'd say 12, 18 months, I feel as I've found my own voice of who I am, and one of the big things I do believe in is being authentic, and I speak from authenticity through some of the challenges I've been through, especially over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And, I'm kind of very much of the nature of that. This is who I am. This is my background. This is where I can help. These I can resonate because I've been through these particular challenges. So very authentic from that. And then I'm a strong believer that, you'll attract, it goes back to the law of attraction, goes back to the primary law of the universe. What you vibrate, you attract. And so if you attract people who, you don't, maybe you don't want to coach, or maybe they're not quite the right people, then it's all down on you. Like, you've attracted that person through maybe language patterns, through your energy. So it's everything always goes back to you. But I think over the last maybe 12, 18 months, I've definitely found my voice a lot more confident. I've been through, had a lot of coaching, a lot of, just know myself a lot more. Like, this is who I am. This is what I offer. This is what I do. And it's kind of in a way like take it or leave it to a certain extent, because it's, this is what I do. And obviously you're always learning, you're always, learning stuff from new people. You're always going back, you're always reading books. I mean, as you probably know, when you start on this sort of self-help journey, it's never ending. You never say, "Oh, I've just done it. I've learned everything I need to know." It's always changing, and I think it goes back to Stephen Covey, and he said, your knowledge base is only every 2 years it needs changing because it's out of date. And that may even be more now with how things have escalated and where things are now from his book. But yeah, you're always growing and learning and changing. But I think right at the moment, I would say, I have definitely found my voice over the last sort of 12, 18 months or so.
Awesome. As I was doing my research on you, I saw, obviously I went to your website, and on your website, I saw that you are on a few magazine covers. How did you attract that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I worked last year, or end of sort of 2001, but going into 2002, with a lady called Natasha Graziano. She's like number one female mindset coach. Does a lot around law of attraction, manifestation. She's got a couple of books out. You may have come across her. Has a massive following. So I was in one of her masterminds. I don't know how. Somehow, I've obviously attracted her into my life.
Right.
Probably through that. But then I was part of a number of her masterminds, sort of going into 2021, 2021, 2022. But last year, actually, I think it was last year. It might have been the year before. Actually, she got married. So she's actually called Natasha Grano now. So a guy called Michael Grano, but he's got his own PR company. So, that was how I attracted that, is obviously working with her. I actually worked with her one-on-one as well in the past. She's someone who's obviously in Canada, who's kind of a PR, and that's his business, getting people in magazines. And so I was speaking with him, and he was able to to get me into the different magazines last year. So yeah.
Fantastic. I could go on all day, but I'm going to cut this right here. But I did want to ask you about tattoos. What got you into tattoos? And do you think women are attractive who have sleeves and other tattoos? Go.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I went straight into actually the States. So I was in the States, and I lived in San Diego, Southern California, quite a big, quite a few people. It's quite a populated area where people wear tattoos, and obviously it's very visible there because obviously the weather. So yeah, I got my first tattoo, like a massive I've got a massive guardian angel on my back at that time, which was kind of represented sort of, kind of that's when I started, even though I didn't know it at that time, I started to get into a little bit more than the spiritual side, biblical side. So I had an angel, kind of guardian angel on my back, and I had like stars underneath representing my parents and my sister. And then once you started, then it just kind of snowballed to a certain extent. Right. So yes, I've got two across my sleeves, and one's very family oriented, and one's very, it has obviously stuff for my dad, it has stuff for my son, it has stuff around our guardian angels and cherubs and all this type of stuff. So it's very, very much on that particular side. And then I've got my other one, which has a phoenix rising from the flames and stuff. So it's very much around the rebirth of myself 5 years ago. And then I've got like a couple of butterflies on my legs, which one represents the past, kind of one represents the kind of the future. So one's kind of a dying one, and one's kind of a blossoming one. So I've got two sides of my body. One's very much the past, and one's very much kind of the future. So there's meaning there. But yeah, it kind of started 2008, I think, something like that. So, but yeah, once you start. Second question, me personally, I do find, I do personally find women who do have tattoos, I do find it, attractive.
Do you think
I do personally, but I know, I didn't.
Masculine nature is
I didn't really ever. I think it was, wasn't it? I think personally, it generally was, and then it's obviously become so mainstream and you see it so much now that it's kind of in a way, if someone doesn't have a tattoo, it's kind of weird to a certain extent. But yeah, I definitely think it did come from a masculine type of energy or background. Right. And I think that's, some of the challenges we face in today. I think, the masculine and feminine there was that polarity between the both. And obviously, in the past, you had those very core masculine, very core feminine type backgrounds. And obviously that makes a perfect match. And obviously as times progress and I'm kind of living in a different environment now, the closer the masculine becomes closer to more the more feminine becomes masculine, you're really shortening that polarity. And I think there is some challenges there in life today, but that's probably a whole different story.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Take a deep breath and plug anything you want to plug, and I'm just going to sit back and until you're done. Plug anything. Tell us. Give me like your final thoughts while you're plugging your website, etc. Okay?
Yeah, perfect. So thanks for that. So as I say, James Peters, transformational, mindset coach. Gone through the Jay Shetty certification school, so I'm a certified, coach as well. And yeah, really, what my biggest sort of, I guess, purpose in life is really helping people, especially men, overcome disempowering emotions, so they can then create a kind of a new way of being through change and transformation, which really breaks sort of generational habits and misbehaviors. You see this a lot, where, general sort of patterns of behavior, generational habits just continuing. It could be, alcoholism, general abuse. I mean, you just see this a lot where it just consists with families. So a lot of that is breaking those generational habits and misbehaviors, which then obviously creates, a more spiritually awakened, joyful environment that then nurtures more confident, empathetic, and passion-filled future generations. So I'm a big believer, if you change yourself as a person, that's going to have impact on your family, and then their family's family, and their family's family. Like, you're breaking, you're not only changing yourself, but you're changing a generation, and you're changing your some very long ingrained generational habits. So it all goes back to yourself. So I'm a big believer in that. I mean, obviously not having a son myself now, but I can see with the changes I've done that, I'd have a massive, different impact on him. And so I can definitely see that, if you change yourself, you can change your family, and obviously the generations beyond that. I'm obviously the biggest platforms for myself. So Instagram is James Peters Lifestyle. My website is jamespeterslifestyle.com. For more information on there. Or obviously where we came across, it's on Twitter. Profile on there, it's James C. Peters. James C. Peters. But yeah, it's James Peters, Transformational Mindset Coach, and that's probably the most active platform now, where people can connect with me, and I do a lot of content on there, not only written content but video content as well.
Okay, James, I want to thank you very, very much for doing this interview. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and hopefully in the future we can do this again and go even deeper on some of these topics and ideas. Thank you very much, and you have a wonderful day.
No, thanks so much. Loved it. It was great. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Michaelson Williams TSX podcast, where Michaelson talks about everything true success. I hope you enjoyed the show. Host Michaelson Williams looks forward to bringing you more fantastic interviews with people who are shaping the future. This episode is sponsored by ADM Fitness Effect, the app that allows users to monetize their increased fitness output and then pays them in ADM crypto tokens for completed tasks. Also by Flow State Design clothing and accessories for the eruditely man, and Map Magazine, the magazine for the true success seeker, like you. Visit jamespeterslifestyle.com to create a better life for yourself through a transformation of mindset. Book a one-on-one coaching session today and start building the life you've always wanted. Don't forget to support the podcast if you like the content, and link up with Michaelson on all social media. Thanks for joining us on the Michaelson Williams True Success Expert Podcast.